Hello everyone, Markystal here, and this is a follow-up video on the arm rotation challenge video from a few weeks back. For those of you that haven't watched the video, click this link right up here in order to have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. Well then everyone, with that, let's get this started. For those of you that didn't click on the video, brief synopsis, effectively there's this weird thing that happens when you try to rotate your arm forward and backwards at the same time. So, what's going on here, guys? What did I figure out? Well, during my little play arounds with the whole situation, I found a few little tricks that kind of make things rather interesting. First things first, I'm going to show you how to do it very quickly, or relatively quickly, in comparison to maybe something like this. Ready? I'm going to take my right arm, rotate it forward very quickly, and my left one's rotating backwards just fine. So, what's going on there? Seems like nothing's really all... Effectively, it seems like I just did the challenge. But here's another interesting little bit. I'm now going to try to do the fast rotations with my left arm and do it backwards with my right. I literally cannot move the right arm almost at all when I do the left arm in this case. So what's up? Effectively, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, aside from a little bit of a concept I think we might be familiar with, which is neuroplasticity. Guys, we generally tend to have a dominant arm in most situations, and in my case, my right arm is my dominant arm. So generally, it might be assumed that whenever I do a task, I'll generally try to do it more with my right arm as compared to with my left. The conclusion I'm kind of coming to here, guys, is that perhaps there are some tasks that our body is capable of automating to a very high degree, while by comparison some other ones are nowhere near as automated and thus require a lot of intense focus in order to perform properly. And that's probably the reason why something like this is a lot easier to do, although I have another concept for that as well. But by comparison, doing this or this is doable but uncomfortable. So that was the first little thing I found out. The second thing was in regards, again, to the similar concept, but in this case I tried doing it while performing a different task. Walking. You see, guys, I would demonstrate this in footage, but then again, the first time I did it, I almost kind of tripped up and hit my head against the wall, so I kind of don't want to repeat that, and either way, I can't get a good camera angle. But effectively, the idea was I was walking straight forward towards the kitchen whilst performing this task. I was capable of doing it rather slowly, but when I decided I wanted to turn towards the door more correctly, I found that I could not make the turn without stopping the arm rotation challenge and then proceeding to walk through the door. I found this extremely weird the first time, and I could not believe that was actually happening, so I tried again and again and again, and no matter how many times I do it, no matter what I do, effectively I have to either A, stop performing the challenge, or B, just hit my head against the wall, I suppose. I'm not really too sure exactly on the mechanism behind this, but I'll kind of get around to that again later in the video, because there's one more little phenomenon I also found. If you try to perform the arm rotation challenge without doing the dominant arm forward and doing the left one kind of slowly, I also found that trying to do things without any form of automation, in other words, trying to do it opposite-wise, at a slightly different speed... As you can probably visibly see in the video footage, I'm kind of struggling with this, but honestly, it is very difficult for me to try to do one hand with focus at one speed and the other hand with focus at another speed. I am calling these kind of tasks that require my mental attention in order to perform it very carefully, well, attention-focused tasks, or focus tasks for short. But basically, focus tasks are very difficult and strenuous to do without paying very much attention to them. By comparison, there are some tasks like automated tasks that I can do with relative ease without really doing anything else. I mean, these kind of tasks might as well be multitasking since I don't really need to pay that much attention to them. But by comparison, trying to do something like this is... I suppose it's very uncomfortable. Even my speaking feels weird. I'm not too sure whether or not that's because it kind of feels like something's crawling up my back whenever I'm doing that, or the sour sensation, or if it's because I'm genuinely losing some attention ability in this case. But effectively, I found that certain tasks take up a lot more effort and mental force in order to perform by comparison to other ones, which I'm basically saying are running on autopilot. Initially, I thought this might be a bizarre conclusion to come to, but as I kept looking into more things, I found out some other information. First of all, if you might have watched this YouTube channel, it's called D News. They actually recently did a video a few weeks back discussing the usage of cells from the nasal passage in order to repair spinal damage, which allowed somebody to start walking again. In the video, they actually cited that our spinal cord itself has some degree of neuroplasticity in regards to certain actions, including reflexes and certain automated tasks. I looked into it a bit more, and lo and behold, there is actually something called spinal locomotion. After reading into it a little bit, it appears that the act or the rhythmic movement that is walking is somewhat based in the spine in some degree, which actually sends the rhythmic messages of walking and taking each step instead of using the brain completely to perform out that task. After looking into that, I also started to come to the conclusion, effectively, that our brain, in regards to certain tasks such as walking or rotating the arms real quick, might be, instead of taking advantage of full attention, simply is using some form of spinal auto command or autopilot button, and effectively just turns it on or off based on our commands in order to keep some focus left over in order to perform some other less or more strenuous tasks at the same time. This could in some degrees be called the multitasking, but really, if science has proven anything, it's that we humans are very, very bad at multitasking, and that most of the things we call multitasking are either some form of subconscious-based action, such as, for example, people often bring up the matter of, if I can't multitask, how can I breathe and talk and not do all sorts of other things at the same time? It's not so much multitasking so much as it is either A, rapid switching, or B, an involuntary action. As an example, some people have asked in the comment sections whether or not you should be able to breathe if your brain is being blocked by the nerve gear. Then here's the thing, guys. Breathing is an involuntary action for the most part. You can control breathing to a degree by manipulating your diaphragm and abdomen, but for the most part there is a bit of automation in regards to breathing. Otherwise, if you were completely unconscious all the time, you wouldn't be able to breathe and you would basically suffocate and die. But yeah, that's just one example, along with the heart, which automatically beats. You don't need your brain to tell your heart to beat, although you might need it to tell it to beat faster if you're really under strenuous actions, but I'm not too sure on that one. But the conclusion I'm trying to get to here, guys, is that I'm starting to think that there may be a mechanism that we can use for virtual reality in some degrees in regards to this little discovery, quote-unquote. The idea I have in mind is for two variables in this case. An intensity variable, which concludes for the entire body. This is derived from the whole I can't really do two actions with focus at different speeds. So effectively, if I can't really do anything at different speeds with attention, I might as well just effectively have one single variable in the computer system for just velocity and just use that across all different commands. This would effectively replace the tilt on an analog stick, whereby having a larger or further tilt and clicking all the way to the edge counts as more intensity by comparison to just slightly tilting it, whereby you're just a little bit towards the center. It would effectively replace that, since you already have the command vector for that in mind, just based on your intensity. And the second item would be a form of attention or focus that you can be dedicated to each task. Certain items may require a symmetry modifier. So for example, right now one could say that I'm performing an opposite task, because my right arm is moving left and my left hand is moving right. So one could argue that these are asymmetric or opposite, but effectively they still are symmetrical on some degree, because the muscle movement required is effectively mirrored on both sides. So I'm not so much thinking moved in the diagonal pattern, so much as I'm thinking contract and expand in regards to my muscles. That's just one conclusion I've come to in that regard. The other commands would effectively be the autopilot and rapid switching system. Autopilot would afford certain pre-canned animations into our system, so instead of having to manually think left, right, the system would instead simply have the pre-canned animation occur upon your mental setting of it, and then continually send you the data feedback of left, right, in terms of sensory feedback. This is reminiscent to what happens in real life, whereby you're kind of walking and paying attention, but really you're only really paying attention to the steps you're taking for a very brief moment in order to calculate whether or not there's any risks occurring or if something's going on that could be potentially dangerous, such as a drop or something in front of you that could act as an obstruction. Although I'm pretty sure that doesn't work out very well in real life most of the time, considering the fact that I personally tend to walk into walls rather frequently. But aside from that, there's also the rapid switching mechanic, which would effectively allow somebody to quickly take an action or a thought command and rapidly switch it between processes. So whenever I move my left hand, I'm moving it very quickly, and when I want to move my right, instead of necessarily having a different 6 degree of freedom value just from my right hand, it would just leave my left hand and switch to my right one, leaving the left hand to either perform a small pre-canned animation or to follow through on the action based on previous data that we've obtained. Guys, all of this is basically speculation on my part and can hardly be called a theory since I have no scientific or direct corollary information in order to really properly get a conclusion down on this. However, I'm just drawing conclusions based on what I have and observed, and honestly guys, even if there is no basis on this, I am genuinely just kind of disappointed in the brain in terms of how many shortcuts it's taking. This year has been a real just mind screw for information for me, since it's really showing me exactly how much effort and tricks and shortcuts our mind has to take to properly keep this little fragile thing we call a sense of reality running. It is honestly a little bit breathtaking and a little humbling in some degrees, because it makes me wonder just how much further we can take things with computer technology when our own brain processors are kind of running up against walls in certain areas. But then again, I also have to consider that they're technically constantly adding qualitative data based on the fovea and creating a picture all the time, along with a bunch of other subconscious processes. But now I'm just mumbling, aren't I? Well then everyone, thank you very much for watching this video. Do try to come to your own conclusions based on the information, or if you really want to get my more concise and well-written thoughts, do check it out over here at the blog that I have linked down below in the description, because it does contain a lot of the information in a more organized and written fashion. And just check out the blog in general, since generally whenever I make anything, it'll come out on the blog before it comes out on video. Also, if you want to keep up to date with all the things I do check out my Twitter, since it is the very best place in order to get all the information on what I'm doing, and or my Facebook page, which also gets directly linked to the information I post on my Twitter, although I think Twitter would probably be the better place to go for it directly. Well then everyone, thank you very much for your time. This has been Markystal, logging out.